The first thing is to measure the beam of your boat at the mast. You also need to know the height of the gunnel above the bottom of the keel. Measure up from the keel bar of the cradle and symmetrically set the width of the front arms by the beam you measured at the mast. You then need to know the beam of the boat where the rear horns of the cradle will be positioned. Symmetrically set the rear horns to this measurement at the height of the gunnel above the keel bar. Once you have done this, open the starboard rear horn to the maximum beam of your boat. This will allow the boat to float in. Now you need to measure the draft of your boat up from the keel bar. At this height, wrap some insulation tape around the starboard front horn. This is so the haul-out team know how far to put the cradle into the water. Once your cradle is set up, you need to attach 2 horn lines to the ends of the front crossbar, and then the other end is coiled and tied to the top of the rear horns. As an alternative, the horn lines can be tied to the front horns by the bracing. The other end is coiled and tied to the rear as previously described. A short bow line must be coiled and tied to a front horn. The tail of this line must have 1.5 meters lying on the ground. This end will be tied to the trolley. The haul out. The foreman is in total charge of the yard. He may stop hauling for weather conditions at his discretion. He can refuse to haul on an unsafe cradle. He may also cancel your haul if you are not on time and or not ready. When you approach the ramp, you will see a white line attached to the pole. You must tie stern to this pole. Ensure the line comes under the lifelines or rail. Pull the other end of this line aboard. When you reach the blue haul-out line, untie it and transfer the end of that blue haul-out line to your bow. When this is done, the haul-out team will run the cradle into the water. Note the 2 horn lines and the bow line on this cradle. When the cradle is at the required depth, as indicated by your insulation tape, the foreman will stop the trolley. The haul-out team will then start to pull your boat into the cradle using the blue line. In the stern line, your crew will control the speed of the boat going into the cradle. This crewman needs to listen for instructions from the foreman. Typically, the words hold or ease will be used. One crew needs to be on the foredeck to guide the boat into the cradle. Note the bow line on the right horn. Once the boat is in the cradle, take the horn lines off the rear horns and put them on to the winches. Winch the boat snugly into the cradle. Take your bow line from the front horn of the cradle, transfer it over the fair lead and tie it off, allowing about 6 inches or 15 centimeters of slack. This is to stop the boat falling over backwards. The crew at the top of the ramp will now call instruction to the foreman to shift crew sideways to ensure the mast is vertical before the boat settles in the cradle. The foreman will then have the trolley pulled up the ramp enough for the boat to ground in the cradle. You will now take the end of the blue hauling line and tie it on to the end of the white stern line. Remember, you untied these before. Ensure the lines are free of snags so the haul-out team can pull the excess to shore. These lines will be used by the next boat to be hauled. The foreman will now bring the boat up the ramp. As the boat approaches the top of the ramp, you can see the horn lines and the bow line. If you have a dinghy, ensure it is on a long painter, which you can drop to a team member standing on the ramp. Once the boat is at the top of the ramp, it will stop so the tractor can be repositioned. At this point, for crew safety, all must get off the boat. The boat will now be positioned to the allocated space on the yard. Once the cradle is on the blocks, secure all running rigging so it doesn't bang on the mast. Either remove all sails or securely lash them to the boom or forestay. The hull must be washed down within 24 hours, and any marine growth must be disposed of off-site. It is your responsibility to be familiar with the haul-out rules, and it is your responsibility to abide by them.